I still remember the sound the suitcase made when it hit the water, a hollow, heavy splash that didn't belong to the quiet of our little lakeside town. It was late, the air cool and thick with fog, and I was sitting on my porch, my usual place since Louis died, wrapped in his old flannel jacket. At first, I thought I was imagining things. 6 months had passed since the accident that took my boy, and my mind still played cruel tricks on me. But then I saw the headlights, Cynthia's car, unmistakable, bright blue with that dent on the bumper Louis had promised to fix. I squinted through the mist, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. She was driving fast, too fast for that narrow gravel road that curved toward the lake. The tires screeched, the car jerked to a stop near the water's edge, and then silence. My heart pounded as I watched her open the trunk. Even from my porch, I could see the struggle, her small frame bent, tugging at something heavy, something wrapped in brown leather. I thought maybe it was trash, or maybe she was finally throwing away Louis's things. But then she heaved it forward with both hands, her body trembling from the effort, and the suitcase hit the lake with that sound I'll never forget. For a moment, she just stood there, breathing hard, her hair wild, her face pale in the moonlight. Then she got back into the car and drove off without a glance back. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was guilt, or maybe just that deep, aching sense that something was terribly wrong. I grabbed my flashlight and ran down the hill barefoot, the gravel biting into my feet. The air smelled like wet earth and gasoline. When I reached the shore, the water rippled, black and cold. The suitcase was sinking slowly, bubbles rising around it. I didn't think, I just went in. The cold cut through my legs like knives. My heart raced, my breath came in short bursts, but I kept wading deeper until my fingers brushed the slick leather handle. It was heavier than I expected. I dragged it toward the shallows, coughing, gasping, praying I was wrong. But when I pulled it onto the sand, unzipped it, the world stopped. Inside was a baby. A tiny, silent baby, wrapped in a thin hospital blanket, his lips purple, his skin pale as porcelain. For a second, I froze. My mind refused to understand what I was seeing. Then I screamed. I screamed for God, for Louis, for anyone who could hear me. I pressed my hands against the little one's chest, trying to remember how to do CPR counting, pushing, begging under my breath. Come on, sweetheart. Come on. My fingers shook so badly I dropped my phone twice before I managed to dial 911. I don't even remember what I said. Just that a woman's calm voice told me help was coming, to keep pressing, keep breathing for him. And then a tiny sound, weak but real. A gasp. He was alive. When the paramedics arrived, they took him from my arms gently, wrapped him in warm towels, and sped off toward the hospital. One of them asked me how I'd found him. I looked back toward the lake, where the fog was closing in again, erasing the tire marks, the evidence, everything. I saw her, I whispered. I saw my daughter-in-law throw him in. They looked at me like I was crazy. Maybe I was. But deep down, I knew what I'd seen. And I knew it wasn't over, because that baby felt like a message. A message from my son. They say, when you tell the truth, it should set you free. But the truth, as I learned that night, can also lock you in a cage of disbelief and whispers. At the hospital, the baby was rushed into the neonatal intensive care unit. They told me he was hypothermic but stable. Stable. That word became a prayer to me. I stood outside the glass, watching his tiny chest rise and fall, wires and tubes covering his fragile body. I didn't even know his name then. All I knew was that someone had tried to erase him from this world before he had a chance to live. When Detective Fatima Salazar arrived, tall, sharp-eyed, calm in a way that made me both trust and fear her, she started asking questions, a lot of them. Mrs. Raines, you're sure it was your daughter-in-law, Cynthia? Yes, I said without hesitation. It was her car, her jacket, her hair. I know what I saw. She wrote everything down in that little notepad of hers, nodding but not believing. I could see it in her eyes. The polite skepticism of someone who's heard too many stories that don't add up. Mrs. Raines, did you have any conflicts with your daughter-in-law recently? I hesitated. My throat tightened. I lost my son 6 months ago. We were both grieving. She tilted her head. Did you ever blame her for his death? The question hit like a slap. I didn't answer right away. Because yes, I had. Quietly. Secretly. Lewis's car had gone off the mountain road in broad daylight. The brakes failed, they said. But Lewis was a careful man, meticulous even. Something had never sat right with me and Cynthia. She'd been distant even at the funeral, her face dry while I wept. Detective Salazar sighed. We'll look into your statement, ma'am. But there's something you should know. Cynthia's car was spotted by a traffic camera 20 miles away around the same time you claim she was at the lake. My stomach dropped. That's not possible. I saw her. Maybe the fog, maybe another car. Maybe grief playing tricks. I wanted to shout, to grab her by the shoulders and make her understand. But all that came out was a whisper. I know what I saw. After the police left, I sat in the waiting room for hours. Nurses came and went. Machines beeped softly down the hall. The world moved on, but I stayed still. When morning came, I went back to the NICU. I wasn't family, not officially, but the nurses let me stand by the glass. The baby looked so small, so helpless. I felt this strange pull in my chest, like he was calling to something buried deep inside me. I started visiting every day. I brought him a soft blue blanket I'd knitted for Lewis when he was a baby. The nurses smiled at me kindly, but kept their distance. To them, I was just some grieving old woman who'd stumbled into someone else's tragedy. Then, a week later, Detective Salazar came back. Her tone was different this time. Mrs. Raines, she said, we got the DNA results. I braced myself. The baby? He's your biological grandson? For a moment, the world tilted. The floor, the walls, everything spun. What did you say? He's your son, Lewis's child. I remember sinking into the chair, my hands trembling so badly I could barely hold onto the paper she gave me. The lab confirmation. Lewis had a child. My son, who died 6 months ago, had a baby no one told me about. And Cynthia. She had tried to kill him. At that moment, I knew the truth wasn't just about what I saw that night. It was about everything I hadn't seen. Everything that had been hidden from me. The detective's voice softened. We're reopening your son's accident investigation. Something inside me, something that had been broken for months, sparked back to life. Because now, finally, someone was listening. But what happened next would test every ounce of faith I had left. The night I found out the baby was my grandson, I didn't sleep. I sat by my kitchen window until dawn. The DNA results spread out on the table like a confession letter from beyond the grave. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lewis's face, that crooked smile of his, the one he used when he was trying to convince me everything would be fine. But everything wasn't fine. It hadn't been for a long time. When Lewis married Cynthia, I tried to welcome her. She was beautiful in that polished, distant kind of way, always dressed perfectly, always smiling for the camera. Lewis adored her, though I could never quite figure out what she saw in my boy. He wasn't rich, not yet. He worked hard, sure, but we lived simple lives. Then came the promotion, the house by the lake, the fancy car, all within a year of their marriage. Cynthia started calling me Betty instead of Mom. She said it sounded more modern. That was when I began to feel her whelp, invisible but real. The weeks after the DNA revelation were a blur. The police reopened Lewis's accident case, and Detective Salazar became a regular presence in my life. She would sit across from me at the kitchen table, her notebook open, her coffee untouched. Mrs. Raines, she said one afternoon, we've recovered messages from your son's phone. He'd been exchanging texts with a friend, mentioned some concerns about Cynthia. I swallowed hard. Concerns? She nodded. He wrote that he'd discovered she was pregnant. He was happy, but worried. He said she'd been acting strangely, hiding financial papers, deleting calls. And a week before the crash, he sent a message to his lawyer about changing his will, leaving everything to his future child. I froze. My throat went dry. You mean not to Cynthia? That's what it looks like, Salazar said. And if that change went through before the accident, well, it would give her motive. I leaned back, staring at the window. Outside, the lake shimmered under the gray light. The same lake where I had found my grandson. I could almost hear Lewis whispering, "You're getting closer, Mom." That night, I dreamed of him. He was standing by the lake, holding the baby in his arms, both of them wrapped in the fog. He smiled, but his eyes were sad. When I reached out, he said, "Protect him, Mom. Don't let her take him." I woke up crying. Over the next few days, I spent every moment I could at the hospital. I called the baby Hector, after Lewis's grandfather, a kind man who used to fish on this very lake. The nurses started calling him by that name, too. It gave me comfort, and somehow it felt right. But the world outside those hospital walls wasn't so kind. Cynthia's lawyer reached out, her lawyer. Apparently, she had denied everything, said I was delusional, grief-stricken, unstable, that I'd made up the story to get attention. Then came the worst part. A social worker showed up at my door. A young woman, kind but firm. She said they were evaluating who would get custody of the baby once he was cleared for release. "Because of your age and your medical history, Mrs. Rains," she said gently, "we'll need to conduct interviews and home assessments. The baby might be placed in temporary foster care until everything is decided." I wanted to scream. "He's my grandson, my family." "I understand," she said softly. "But rules are rules." That night, I sat alone in Lewis's old room. His photographs still hung on the walls, one of him and Cynthia smiling by the lake, another of him in his graduation gown. I ran my fingers over his face, tracing the glass. "Don't worry, baby," I whispered. "I'll bring him home. I'll make this right." And then, as if the universe had been listening, the phone rang. It was Detective Salazar again. "Mrs. Rains," she said. "We found something. You might want to sit down." My heart stopped. "What is it?" "There's a mechanic who worked on your son's car before the crash. He's ready to talk." I felt a chill run through me. "What does that mean?" "It means, Betty." She paused, her voice low. "Your son's death wasn't an accident." I drove to the station with my hands trembling on the steering wheel. The world outside felt blurred, distant, like I was moving through a memory instead of a day. I hadn't driven much since Lewis died. Every turn of the road reminded me of him. But that morning, I had to go. Detective Salazar said the mechanic wanted to speak to me in person. When I arrived, the station smelled of coffee and rain-soaked concrete. Salazar met me at the door. "You ready?" she asked quietly. I nodded, though my knees felt like paper. She led me down a narrow hallway to a small room. Inside sat a man in grease-stained overalls, his face hollowed by guilt. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. He looked up when I entered. "Mrs. Rains," he said softly. I never meant for anyone to die." The words made my blood run cold. "Start from the beginning," Salazar said. He rubbed his palms together, eyes darting toward the window. "6 months ago, your daughter-in-law came to the shop where I work. She said the brakes on her husband's car were acting funny. I told her to bring it in. When she did, she offered me money to make sure those brakes would fail." I gasped. The room tilted. She told me her husband had been cheating. Said she wanted to scare him, make him crash, just enough to teach him a lesson. I didn't believe her at first. But she gave me $10,000 cash. I needed it. My wife was sick and the bills. His voice cracked. "I swear, I thought it would just cause a small accident. I didn't know he'd die." Detective Salazar leaned forward. "You have proof of this transaction?" He nodded weakly and pulled out his phone. "I kept the messages." I was scared she'd turn on me. The detective took the phone, scrolling silently. "We'll verify this." Then she turned to me. "Mrs. Rains, this confirms what you suspected. Lewis's death was no accident." I could barely breathe. My whole body shook, my heart pounding like a hammer. I wanted to scream, to hit something, to claw the air and pull my son back from wherever he'd gone. But all I could do was whisper, "Why? Why would she do this?" The mechanic's voice was almost a whisper. She said there was money involved, life insurance, maybe, and that she'd get more if he was gone. I closed my eyes and suddenly I was back at Lewis's funeral. The polished casket, the scent of Lilith Cynthia. Standing at the edge of the grave, her eyes dry, her lips pursed in something that looked an awful lot like satisfaction. When I opened my eyes again, everything inside me had changed. Grief gave way to something sharper, colder, determination. After I gave my statement, I sat in my car for nearly an hour, just watching the rain trail down the windshield. I thought of the baby, of Hector, lying in that hospital bed, fighting to stay alive. And I thought of Louis, working late nights, planning a future he'd never live to see. She had taken my son from me, and then she had tried to drown his child. I whispered to the rain, "You won't win, Cynthia." Not this time. In the days that followed, everything moved quickly. The mechanic's confession led to an arrest warrant. Cynthia disappeared, packed her things, emptied her accounts, and vanished before the police could reach her. The news spread fast in our small town. People whispered when I went to the grocery store. Some pitied me, others doubted me, but I didn't care. My focus was Hector. I filed for temporary custody. The process was brutal. Home visits, psychiatric evaluations, paperwork that felt endless. The social worker was kind but cautious. "It's a big responsibility, Mrs. Rains. A baby requires constant care." "You're 62. I've raised one good man," I told her. "I can raise another." She smiled softly. "We'll see what the court decides." While I waited, I spent my days knitting little clothes and reading baby books, anything to fill the hours. The house felt alive again, filled with quiet purpose. I cleaned Louis' old nursery, the one we painted blue when he was born, and hung a mobile above the crib. One afternoon, Detective Salazar stopped by with a small smile. "We've got her," she said. "We found Cynthia's car at a motel 3 towns over." She ran, but she won't get far. Relief flooded through me, and fear. Because if Cynthia was cornered, she might lash out. Salazar's voice grew serious. "She knows you're seeking custody. Be careful." "She's desperate," I nodded, but inside I felt ready. For the first time in months, I wasn't just surviving. I was fighting back. Still, I didn't know how close Cynthia already was, or how the next phone call would change everything again. They say patience is a virtue, but when the life of a child hangs in the balance, patience feels like punishment. Weeks passed as I waited for the custody hearing. Each day I drove to the hospital, sat beside Hector's crib, and hummed old lullabies Louis used to love, soft, tender songs about sunshine and home. The nurses had grown used to me by then. Some even smiled when I arrived. They called me Grandma Betty, but the nights were harder. That was when the fear crept in. The fear that the court would decide I was too old, too broken, too unstable. That they'd take Hector away and hand him over to strangers, or worse, that Cynthia would reappear and claim him. The social worker visited again a few days before the hearing. Her name was Marla, a kind woman in her 40s with sad eyes. She walked through every room of my house, taking notes. I'd spent the whole morning cleaning and baking cookies, trying to make the place look warm and safe. When she stepped into Louis's old nursery, she stopped. "You've already set up a crib." "Yes," I said softly. I wanted him to have a room ready. She smiled, but there was pity behind it. "You know, Mrs. Rains, these cases can be complicated. There's still an open investigation involving the child's mother. Until that's resolved, the court may hesitate." "I don't care how complicated it is," I said, my voice trembling. "That baby belongs with me. He's family." She nodded slowly, scribbling something on her clipboard. "We'll take that into consideration." After she left, I sat in Louis's old rocking chair and stared out the window. The lake shimmered in the afternoon light. It looked calm, peaceful, but I knew better. Under that still surface, it hid secrets. It always had. The day of the hearing arrived gray and wet, the sky heavy with rain. I wore Louis's old silver cross for luck. Detective Salazar came with me, though she couldn't testify. She said she just wanted to be there for moral support. The courtroom felt cold, impersonal. The judge, a stern woman with gray hair and sharp glasses, looked down at me like she was reading a story she wasn't sure she believed. My lawyer, a gentle man named Curtis, spoke about my devotion, my daily visits, my stable home. Then came the state's attorney. She questioned my age, my health, and my recent grief counseling. "Mrs. Rains, do you really believe you're equipped to raise an infant at your age?" I lifted my chin. "Yes, because love doesn't retire." There was a murmur in the courtroom. Even the judge looked up at that. When it was over, the judge said she'd take everything under advisement and render her decision within the week. Those next 7 days felt longer than my entire 62 years. Every ring of the phone made my heart jump. When the call finally came, I nearly dropped the receiver. "Mrs. Rains," Marla said, "the judge has granted you temporary custody. Pending final review, the baby will be released into your care." I sank to my knees right there in the kitchen. Tears spilled down my face. "Thank you." "Oh, thank you." When I picked up Hector from the hospital, the nurses lined up to say goodbye. They hugged me, handed me his discharge papers, and whispered blessings. I buckled him carefully into the car seat, my hands trembling. On the drive home, I kept glancing at him in the rearview mirror. He was so small, his face peaceful in sleep. For the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't felt since Louis died. Hope. That night, I rocked Hector to sleep in the nursery. The house was filled with the gentle creak of the chair, the soft hum of his breathing. I whispered, "You're safe now, my darling. Grandma's got you." Then the phone rang. At first I ignored it. I didn't want to wake him, but it rang again. Reluctantly, I picked it up. The voice on the other end froze the blood in my veins. "Hello, Betty." It was Cynthia, calm cold to calm. "I see you've been playing mother again," she said. "Enjoy it while it lasts." My throat went dry. "What do you want?" She laughed, low, bitter, familiar. "You know what I want, my son, and the $500,000 from Lewis's estate. You're holding both? Cynthia, you're wanted for murder." "You'll never—" "Don't be so sure," she hissed. "He's my child, legally. And if you don't cooperate, maybe next time, you won't be the one pulling someone from the lake." The line went dead. I stood there, shaking, the receiver still pressed to my ear. Outside, thunder rolled over the lake. I knew then it wasn't over, not even close, because Cynthia was coming back. And this time, she wasn't running. After that phone call, sleep became impossible. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of wind against the windows made my heart jump. I moved Hector's crib into my bedroom, kept a flashlight and a baseball bat by the door. The lake outside glimmered like a dark eye watching us. Detective Salazar came the next morning. I hadn't even called her yet. She must have sensed something. "You look like you haven't slept in a week," she said, glancing at the dark circles under my eyes. "She called me," I whispered. "Cynthia. She wants the baby and the money." That got her attention. "Did she threaten you directly?" I nodded. "She said if I don't cooperate, someone else will end up in the lake." Salazar exhaled slowly, her jaw tightening. "She's desperate, Betty. She knows we're close." "That means she'll make a move soon?" I clutched my robe tighter. "What can we do?" She looked at me steadily. "We set a trap." That word made my stomach twist, but something inside me, the same fierce instinct that had driven me into the lake that night, told me it was the only way. Salazar's plan was simple but terrifying. We'd arrange a meeting. Cynthia had demanded both Hector and the estate money. We'd make her believe she could get them. The police would be nearby, recording everything. All I had to do was wear a wire and play my part. "I can't put you in danger," Salazar said, frowning. "You've been through enough." I met her gaze. "Detective, that woman murdered my son and tried to drown my grandson. I'm the one she wants. So I'll be the one to end it." She hesitated, then nodded. "All right. But we do this my way. We control every variable." We arranged the meeting for the following evening at an old boat warehouse by the lake, the same lake where it all began. I could almost hear Louis whispering from somewhere beyond, "Be careful." "Mom," that night I stood in front of the mirror, fastening the small recording device beneath my blouse. My hands were trembling. Salazar's team hid around the perimeter of the warehouse, in unmarked cars, behind crates, waiting. When Cynthia's car headlights appeared through the fog, my breath caught. She stepped out slowly, wearing black jeans and a leather jacket. Her hair was pulled back, her expression cold and composed. "Hello, Betty," she said softly. "You look tired." I held my ground. "Where's your conscience, Cynthia?" She smiled, but her eyes were dead. "Oh, please, don't play moral. You think you're some kind of saint, rescuing the baby I didn't even want? Let's be honest, you just wanted a replacement for your precious Louis." The words cut deep, but I didn't let them show. "He's your son too." Her lips curled. "A mistake. Louis trapped me. I was supposed to have a new life, his money, his house. Then he had to ruin it all by changing his will. I stared at her, barely breathing. You killed him? She shrugged lightly. He was a fool. I told the mechanic to make it quick. He didn't have the nerve. The warehouse was silent except for the sound of the lake lapping against the dock. Cynthia took a step closer. Now, give me the money, Betty, and bring the baby. We can settle this quietly. I forced my voice to stay steady. You'll never get him. For the first time, her smile faltered. Her eyes darkened. You really think you can stop me? Before I could react, she pulled a gun from her jacket. The sound of the safety clicking off echoed like thunder. Where is he? She demanded. I froze. My heart slammed in my chest. I knew the officers were listening, waiting for the signal, but time seemed to crawl. I whispered, You'll never hurt him again. Her face twisted with rage. Then I'll start with you. The flash was blinding, the sound deafening. Pain exploded in my shoulder, hot, searing pain that sent me staggering backward. But in the distance, I heard shouting, Drop the weapon. Police, and the echo of footsteps. Cynthia turned, panicked, firing once more before hands grabbed her, forcing her to the ground. The world went blurry. I remember Salazar's voice, urgent, steady. We got her. Betty, stay with me. I tasted iron, felt warmth trickle down my arm. She's in custody, Salazar said. It's over. But as I drifted in and out of consciousness, I knew it wasn't over. Not yet, because justice doesn't end with an arrest. Justice ends when truth is seen and believed. When I woke up in the hospital, everything felt like a foggy dream. The ceiling lights blurred. The room hummed with distant voices and beeping monitors. My left shoulder throbbed, wrapped tight in bandages. The first thing I asked was, the baby. Is Hector safe? Detective Salazar was sitting beside my bed, her expression soft for the first time since I'd met her. He's safe, Betty, he's fine, and Cynthia's in custody. She won't hurt anyone again. Tears filled my eyes. Relief came like a wave, sharp, cleansing, and painful all at once. In the days that followed, the world moved quickly. News spread across the town. Local widow shot by fugitive daughter-in-law and failed kidnapping attempt. Reporters hovered outside the hospital, but Salazar shielded me from most of it. She told me that Cynthia had confessed everything, the murder, the sabotage, even her plan to kill the baby for the inheritance. The recordings from the sting operation had captured every word. Her calm admission of guilt chilled everyone who heard it. She said she married Louis for his money, Salazar told me quietly one evening. She admitted to paying the mechanic, then faking the alibi with a friend who agreed to lie for her. When the baby survived, she panicked. That's when she came back. I listened, numb. All this for money. Salazar shook her head. Some people think greed will save them. It never does. When I was strong enough to walk, I was discharged. My shoulder ached, but I was alive, and that felt like a miracle. The house seemed brighter somehow, even though nothing had changed. Hector's laughter filled the air now, soft and pure. I'd catch myself standing in the doorway, just watching him breathe. The trial began 2 months later. I sat in the front row every day, my arms still stiff from the wound. Cynthia sat at the defense table, her hair pulled back neatly, her expression blank. The woman who had once called me Mom wouldn't even look at me. The prosecutor laid everything bare. The mechanic's confession, the text messages, the recording of Cynthia's cold voice saying, he was a fool. I told the mechanic to make it quick. The courtroom was silent as the evidence played. Some people gasped, others simply stared. I watched her face, nothing, not a tear, not a hint of remorse. When it was my turn to testify, my knees trembled, but my voice held steady. I trusted her, I said. I loved her like my own. She took my son, and she tried to take my grandson. But what she didn't understand was that love doesn't die with loss. It grows stronger. For a brief moment, Cynthia met my eyes. There was something flickering there, not regret, but something close to fear. After 2 weeks, the jury deliberated for just 6 hours. They found her guilty on all counts: first-degree murder, attempted murder, conspiracy, and child endangerment. The judge's words rang through the courtroom. Cynthia Raines, you will serve life in prison without the possibility of parole. I closed my eyes. I thought I'd feel triumphant. I didn't, just tired. Outside the courthouse, Detective Salazar walked me to my car. You did it, she said softly. You saw it through. I didn't do it alone, I replied. You believed me when no one else did. She smiled faintly. You saved that baby's life, Betty. Twice. That night, I sat on the porch with Hector asleep in my arms. The lake was calm again, silver under the moonlight. For the first time in months, I wasn't afraid of it. The water that had once taken so much from me had given something back, a reason to live. I whispered into the night, "It's over, Louis. She can't hurt him anymore." The wind moved through the trees, gentle and low, almost like a reply. But deep inside, I knew one thing wasn't finished yet, the adoption. I wasn't just Hector's guardian, not yet. I wanted to be his forever. And when the final court hearing came, I would face one last test of heart, one last chance to honor the love that had survived everything. The final hearing was quieter than I expected. No reporters, no crowd, just me, my lawyer, the judge, and a clerk taking notes. Outside, spring sunlight poured through the courthouse windows. Hector was nearly a year old now, chubby-cheeked and curious, babbling softly in the carrier on my chest. When the judge entered, I stood. My hands shook a little, but not from fear. It was the kind of trembling that comes from knowing the end of a long road is finally within reach. Mrs. Raines, the judge began, her tone warmer than before. I have reviewed your petition for adoption and the extensive reports from Child Services. Given the outcome of the criminal case and your demonstrated capacity to care for the child, I see no reason to delay. For a second, the words didn't register. Then she smiled. Congratulations. From this moment forward, you are the legal mother and guardian of Hector Louis Raines. The gavel struck, sharp and final. My breath caught in my throat. I felt the tears before I even realized I was crying. Marla, the social worker, handed me the paperwork. You did it, Betty, she said softly. He's yours. I looked down at Hector. He blinked up at me, reaching out his tiny hand, brushing my chin. In that moment, I could almost feel Louis's presence in the room, strong, proud, peaceful. The judge came down from the bench, surprising me. You remind me of my own grandmother, she said. Stubborn, determined, and full of heart. He's lucky to have you. I smiled through my tears. No, Your Honor, I'm the lucky one. Life after the trial was different. Quieter, simpler. I sold Louis and Cynthia, us housed by the lake, the memories there were too heavy, and bought a small cottage closer to town. The neighbors knew our story, but they respected our privacy. When I walked Hector in his stroller each morning, they'd wave from their porches, whispering, "That's the woman who saved her grandson." As the years passed, the ache of grief softened into something else. I never forgot Louis, but I learned to live with his absence, like a scar that no longer hurt when touched. Every milestone Hector reached a first step, a first word. His first day of preschool felt like a conversation between the living and the lost. He grew into a bright, happy boy. 5 years old, full of questions. One evening, as we watched the sunset over a calm pond behind our new home, he asked, "Grandma, where's my daddy?" The question stopped my heart for a beat. I took his small hand in mine. "Your daddy is in heaven, sweetheart. But he's always with you. You have his eyes, you know." He smiled, and his heart. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat, especially his heart. Sometimes I tell him stories about Louis, the way he used to laugh, the songs he sang while fixing his old truck, how gentle he was with animals. Hector listens with wide eyes, like he's collecting puzzle pieces of a man he never met. When he's older, I'll tell him the rest. Not the darkness, not the cruelty, but the truth of how love can survive even the worst betrayals. How a mother's heart and a grandmother's courage can outlast evil. One night, after putting him to bed, I stepped out onto the porch. The air smelled of pine and rain. The moon shimmered on the water, calm and forgiving. I closed my eyes and whispered, "We made it, Louis." A cool breeze brushed my cheek, soft as a kiss. I believe some loves never die. They just change shape, becoming the laughter of a child, the warmth of a small hand in yours, the peace of knowing that even after the darkest night, dawn always comes. Now, When people ask me what kept me going through everything, the loss, the lies, the fear, I tell them the truth. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even justice, it was love. Pure, stubborn, unstoppable love. Because love, when it's real, is stronger than death. And that is the legacy my son left behind.